Good evening, good evening, good morning, good afternoon for all the global audience that's on IoT Metrics 2020. We have a very exciting session coming up uh, by none other than Supria Dhanda, a very close friend of mine and a great personality who's kind of taken Western Digital India to the next level. So she's going to talk about data. Data is a new fire. So before she comes on stage, I just want to kind of give a few words about Supriya Dhanda. Supriya is the VP and country manager of Western Digital India. She leads India's strategic charter and its expansion, key customer relationships, government relations, sustained growth of research and development capability, and serves as a spokesman for the corporate brand in India. Supriya's fusion of business acumen, strategy, and organizational development has driven high performance culture and strong growth for India region. She has more than 22 years of work experience in corporate and has held several leadership roles in business and people functions. Has anchored M&As and has been an entrepreneur as well. She serves on the board of Western Digital India and an independent member of the board, and also an advisory board member on other companies. Prior to her roles at Western Digital, Supria has served with reputed tech companies including GE, Alcatel-Lucent, and SanDisk. Supria is passionate about technology and people. She strongly believes in institutionalizing an inclusive culture at workplace and one that values respect and equality for all alike. Supria believes passionately in giving back to the community for building a sustainable future. She is a proud recipient of the recognitions: Top 100 Best Companies to Work for, Women in India, Working Mother and Avatar Study 2016 and 2019, twice when Western Digital India participated in the study. Supria has also been recently awarded as CEO of the Year for Diversity and Inclusion at the Global DEI Summit 2020, hosted by Times of India and Ask Insights. So at this stage, I would warmly welcome Supria to address us and give us a piece of her wisdom. Supria, over to you.
Thank you, Venki. Well, that's a lot of data for a session that's titled, Data is the New Fire. So very happy to be here. I hope I'm audible and using technology to the maximum. It's all okay, Venki?
Yes, you're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you. So herein, we're going to spend next 30 to 35 minutes, followed by maybe a mild Q&A. I say mild because that's not something we're looking at right now as part of the session. I think we have a great agenda that's fully packed and loaded, and I can't wait for the event to unfold and listen it to other fellow co-speakers. So I'm going to use the presentation and let's get the conversation going. So just give me one moment while I get the screen shared. All right. There we go. We're looking at the title is, like I said, data is the new fire. We've all had conversations as to how data is the new oil, and I'm going to touch upon that in a while from now. But let's look at what fire is. To everybody on the call today, in a world that's digitally connected, fire, of course, needs no introduction. But to contextualize that for this conversation, let's look at what fire gave us. When fire was there, it kind of brought in a lot more evolution in the mankind. And we all love reading. I'm sure a lot of us do. When you look at the latest, latest hit that's there by Yuval Noah Harari, which is the Sapiens, that talks about how fire was dominated, domesticated by humans. How at one end, there is this great advantage that fire brought in, which is warmth, comfort, food, and therefore a lot of evolution took place. Otherwise, if this wasn't there and a lot of other discoveries wasn't there, inventions wasn't there, we probably would not be a human race that will dominate. 70,000 years ago, we were one of those that we fondly call chimpanzees, but today we call us beautiful humans. And therefore, there is a lot else that's also happened. Why is it that we survive today? We survived, of course, fire helped us, and a lot of other things that were innately human in us, which is our ability to think, our ability to get together, our ability to collaborate. And a lot of those came to our rescue. And we are going to take this analogy, kind of juxtapose it on data and say how data today presents to us a great opportunity. Also, a challenge because we are struggling with it. We need to be able to overcome, understand, and fully utilize the potential that it has. And also, as we journey along, we want to make sure that, like fire can burn us, we are all reading what fire in California is kind of wreaking havoc. We also want to make sure that this use of data is contextually put to the right good use and it does not burn us. And therefore, there are certain cautions that we need to be very, very well aware of. So let's see presentation and the conversation unfold. We all think data is new and it is here and now. And we say that, before 2010, all the data that was created was less than 10%. 90% and more data that's created after 2010 has been, that's the history. And therefore, in the last 10 years, we have seen data kind of take on our lives. And we will talk in a moment about that. But when you talk about the history of data, it was a very interesting conversation that I would love to have with you, is let's go back to 19,000 BC, where there was this Ishango bone, which is used as the tally stick. So data is not new. It has been there in its form, size, shape, which is different. 3000 BC, when the writing got discovered, of course, there was cuneiform, which was the form of writing, and that perhaps was the earliest form of storage. And I know the company that I represent, Western Digital, some of us were cringe when we look at this to say, wow, that is how perhaps primitive it was. But like someone says, give me anything which is non zero and I can multiply and make it bigger. Well, I think I'm glad there was a form of storage, some form that existed. And of course, technology evolved and we are at a cusp of huge evolution and revolution today. Give it 1600s and 1640, that's when they looked at that what is it that we need to do. There is this deaths that were happening by London Parish, and there was a need to record. And of course, that started happening, and the recording of that started happening. And there was John Grant, who was now called the father of demography. The death records were tabulated. Come 1800, there is, of course, this processing. There was a lot more data that was there. And there was this thing to say, what do we do with data? So I would say late 1800 is when the data was beginning to cause a little bit of a problem in the lives of individuals. And they were figuring, because there was this population in US, someone wanted to tabulate, and they were wondering what to do. In 1880 US census was something that was perhaps the first time when processing of data, figuring out, tabulating, analyzing, some of those forms came into existence. 1900, of course, needs no introduction. It's the world of magnetic tape drives. A lot of storage happened, and this technology, by the way, has stayed with us a lot more in terms of hard disk drives, in terms of magnetic tapes, hard disk, floppy disks, and all that. And now when we talk about, and I'm just going to move this up. And then, of course, we talk about the evolution of internet, which perhaps is the biggest technological revolution that has changed the world, that has connected you and me, that has connected all of us across the world. And 1997 is, of course, when Google search came into existence. And that has not left our lives. And we pray to God it doesn't. That is pretty much our life. And we love what Google search does and does for us. So that is where we are. When we chronologically look at it, it's not new. It's been there with us. And now it is that when we are saying that it is there in the hands of everyone, from the hands of few people looking at it today, it is there. It's a power that is there. And therefore, we are saying each of us have obviously a role to play in it. Let's take the conversation forward and see. What is it? Sorry, I missed a slide. So let's look at what is it that the data is doing in our lives. It was something that I wanted to think about to say, well, there was a time when technology wasn't all pervasive. And there was a time when technology was not in everyday part of our life, when data wasn't so friendly and perhaps in the hands of each and every individual across the world, at least half of the individuals across the world. So let's look at pre-digital. From one to many interactions that we all were doing, There was this queuing at a teller counter. I remember visiting the bank and standing in queues. There was a different counter to take the cash, there was a different counter to submit receipts, and our world was kind of complicated, if so as to call it. And today, well, this could be my dad, it could be my husband, could be my son looking at banking from home. Technology and data mixed together have made our life a lot easier. There were those of us who were looking for a friend. We perhaps studied together, we were neighbors. We didn't even know what's happening in each other's lives, and today's social networks connect us. Talk about pandemic, and we are all sitting at our homes and connecting to the larger window of the world. It may be a device we are connected to, but we know the entire world is open to us. There are reunions that are happening virtually. There is an entire digital world that's connecting. In Facebooks, we can see what's happening. Instagram, we can discuss. Twitter, we can share an opinion. With LinkedIn, we can celebrate movements, jobs, new articles, new opinions, all of that. So our world has become a lot more closer and a lot more connected. And there is a lot more data at play all the time from shopping in stores. And this is when I say whether you're sitting at a favorite shop, visiting in Commercial Street, or you're visiting Fifth Avenue in New York or Bond Street in London, it is there today. You don't need to go to all those places as much as you may want to. It is still at a will, at a choice that this offers you. Because e commerce today is at the click of a button. You can order in anything, and the entire business models are evolving from early on just being able to order to cash on delivery, which India looked at it, to now, your returns, to trying on at home. All of that world is exploding because people are now saying, from doing it individually one to many, we are now thinking, what does Venki need? What does Supriya need? What does Mr. Anand need? What does Dilberg need? And is there a way to customize these experiences? Because constantly data is being generated, analyzed, insights being distilled, which we call information, knowledge being generated, and therefore there is a lot of wisdom that is in the hands of many today. And therefore we can all claim to be wise. And therefore, that is what data is empowering. It is really fueling our lives from morning to night to, of course, the next day morning. And you had a great session with Dilberg on the entire racing part of that. And I particularly love watching Formula Ones. Look at it from driving manually to what we fondly call is the vintage cars today, to an entire experience which is so nicely connected. You sit inside your car and you know that your car is the end of the window to the world. And I had this great honor of listening to George Messing, and who's the vice president technology with Daimler. And it was a fascinating conversation to listen to when he is talking about. He's also called the Mr. MBUX because he's created this. He's the man behind this entire open platform MBUX that Daimler has created, and which now sits inside a Mercedes Benz, wherein you are creating an ecosystem, a platform which is open. You're inviting other apps to be able to talk to you and create, at the end of the day, a user experience. You get in the car and you will know exactly where to stop, what coffee to take, and you can have this multiple permutations, combinations of Starbucks favorite. Where do you want to go? Which is your favorite, place to fuel? Stuff like that, and what kind of channel you want to listen to, the music, the news. Oh my God. From clicking multiple things to just one click and the world, expansive universe is opening to you. Well, that's what it is doing. It was also fascinating to listen to their story of CASE, where they're looking at CASE, wherein C stands for connected, A for autonomous, S for sharing, and shared services, and E for electric. And the entire thing was to say how electrical architecture is evolving. All of the ecosystem is opening, data is being at the heart of it, technology and data multiplied are bringing in a completely different user experience. And that is you and me at the center of it. And we get to enjoy all the benefits. And there's someone who already knows what we want. So there is tons of data which is part of our everyday life. Be it you get up in the morning and you use a pedometer to tell you how much you walked and it brings a smile on your face, or be it a pedometer that tells you, well, you know what, lazy you didn't walk today. It's kind of interesting when, instead of my husband, my pedometer app on my iPhone talks to me and says, did you walk today? And I'm like, really? No, I didn't today. I was lazy. I wish I could chat. But of course, there are conversations you can have. But that is what our world looks like today, my friends. It is extremely connected, and data is powering and making it a lot more interesting. Talking about it today, these are typically charts, I would say, as a woman in business or a woman in technology. I have mostly seen conversations like this, statistics like this, always say why diversity is important. It saddens me sometime today when I'm still part of the conversation and the data comes and says, let's hire more women. Let's promote one more women. 48% of India has women, but only 20% are there, in the workforce. Where are the other 28%? When there is data like, you look at across the world, there are these Fortune 500, but only less than 7% of the company CEOs are women. When I look at that data, it tells me it's a call to do something. And there is this data, however, is far more compelling and more powerful. And I'm hoping this is a very different story it tells than perhaps diversity. There is enough and more research that is there. People are constantly, researchers, Gartner, BCG, they're all constantly thinking, how is it? How is it that if you are using data to power your centrality of your strategy of a company, what kind of benefits are you reaping in? And I'm glad there is so much of literature research available. So they are saying if you are having and using data, there is clearly 23 times power that you will have in acquiring new customers. Well, that increasingly is in a huge number. I would say 23 times power in acquiring customers. I don't know which CEO in the world would not want to do that. Which sales head would not want to say that I put my badge on to say, I want to use data, understand where my customers are, what they want, so that I can do a lot more customer acquisition. I know my sales team would love it. And at the end of the day, they say you need to have customers stay with you as much as you bring in new customers. That probably is, again, a very healthy business to have. 6 times it helps you in your customer retention. 19 times your company, your business can be far more profitable if you use data. And 3 times faster decision making. It's like they say that, right? Supria, if you're talking to us, well, that's an opinion. Show us data, and we know you're talking facts. Where data gets its origin from the Latin word, datum, which talks about fact. Data is nothing but a fact. And I think there are a lot of these facts that are there as part of our lives. BCG also did a survey, and they said they asked a lot of enterprises 2021 and beyond, what do you think is the use of data? There is an economic downturn, there is pandemic that we all are facing. There is pressure on the kind of investments we can do to further propel the business. And when that question was asked, 75% of the CEOs said, digital transformation is absolutely in the top 3 things that I need to do. And what was interesting about that fact was that as much as digital transformation was something that was early on looked at, used as to drive costs down. We've all heard of how automation can drive automation processes, kind of bring in a lot more process out automation, use data to make stuff, intelligent decisions. It was all to be able to see where probably we need to cut a bit of the fat, make the company more slim. Well, today, the reality is data is being used to have top line discussion, which is all about when you see the customer acquisition and retention, it's all a top line discussion. Profitability is making sure your company is far more productive, far more, the margins are a lot more healthy. And we all know Wall Street loves great gross margins in the company. And they also, when they looked at to say that who is sponsoring this data centrality, there were 70% of those who were in the CXO. So clearly CXOs are looking at saying, well, this is what we want. This is the future. And therefore, we are not delegating this as much as we believe we have talented, great next lines and successions built in. We want to make sure this is top of our charter. And we all know that change begins at the top. And when it does, it kind of, there is a sustained momentum to it. So 70% of those said that. And then, like I said, there's a downturn. We're all facing, we all have realities of business to look at. We all have limited funds. Where is this fund going to come from? And the answer was even more promising when they said that we should be able to self-fund, which means there are these funds that we have, which are there for certain initiatives. We obviously are going to turn that around. We're going to reprioritize, because at the end of the day, if data is so critical and to drive a digital transformation is so critical, to drive the top line is so critical, we will find a way to fund that from within our funds. And 65% of those, like we always believe, if you want a great initiative done, you got to put people behind it, you got to put resources behind it, and resources are both intangible and, of course, people. 65% have said they have a dedicated chief data officer right there. And of course, there was another interesting stat that said how many companies were asked to say that you think digitally, the digital transformation, the data that is invading your lives and whatever it's going to do, it's going to disrupt your business models. I can say, leading a company, a technology company, I'm part of many conversations wherein The question we ask ourselves is, what can disrupt our business? What new thing can come that perhaps make us disappear? And therefore, those disruption conversations are part of everyone's life. And 65% of them have it. 30% of them said, we think that data, the entire disruption can perhaps change the business model. And today with pandemic, the lockdowns, everybody kind of socially, kind of distant and yet digitally connected, business models are changing. We are looking at new ways to reorder the supply chain. Everything is being looked at. And I would say personally for me, this is less about technology, less about that, but it's more about beliefs getting disrupted. We are changing different mindsets. And unless we wear new lens, we perhaps will miss the bus, but I know we won't. I'm sure with so much data making us wise, there are new decisions or there are new things that we are going to, perhaps explore. So where is data when you look at, let's take the conversation to say, data is powering our lives. It is impacting. And where is it that we see the impact? There are many, many sectors in which the data is impacting. It is like, you talk about any sector, you talk about fintech, it's there. You talk about financial services, it is there. And I want to take an example of, healthcare, because it's all about saving lives. And when you look at the numbers, they are very, very promising numbers. And I was looking at them, and I'm going to take a quick note and read them out for you. Global healthcare, the big data analytics, is an industry which is $9.5 billion by 2023. $9.5 billion by 2023 is the number we are talking. And if you look at the global IoT healthcare market, we're looking at $137 billion by 2021. Those are the numbers we're looking at. Global AI, use of artificial intelligence in healthcare, we're looking at a $7 billion market by 2021. We're talking about hundreds billions dollar industry being created. We're talking about tens of billion dollar industry being created with data powering the use of AI and making machines a lot more intelligent. And at Western Digital, we have this practice of doing data innovation bazaar every year. We do that in partnership with the government. We do that in partnership with TAI. It's a very successful thing where we look at how is it that we understand where is the world of data being used to power new startups, new ideas coming to the fore. We do this national challenge across India, and we were very happy to see we did it for DIB 2020, which is this year. Again, happy to say that, none of the pandemic, nothing stopped us. The show must go on. We were having significantly, 40 different winners. The top winner, however, was Arogya AI. And that's an example I would love to share here to say how fascinating startups are and how they're using AI to power some new solutions and make our lives and the lives of every human being different. Arogya AI was the number one winner. It's happy feeling for me personally to say it's a team led by two women, and that's fascinating. But more important than that is what they are doing. They're using AI to look at the solution, which is power how drug-resistant tuberculosis can be detected. And from erstwhile, minus the use of data and AI and the technology, it used to take weeks, and they say their solution, and they have proved it, can be done in less than few hours. Now that is use of data to save lives. And it's a team led by Prapti and Avalikita. They are fascinating women to talk to. So I would say if you want some inspiration, go and have a chat with them. It's just great story as to how one MBA and one doctor have come together, an engineer MBA and doctor have come together, and they've created this Arogya AI, which is absolutely a record winner in how they are solving it. I'll take another example of Niramai. Dr. Geeta Manjunath, who's at the helm of it. When you look at statistics, the pink ribbon stands for breast cancer. Every second, I think 1 in 12 women are detected with breast cancer. And whilst there are more cases in US, India has a peculiar story of that. India, the cases are less, but the mortality is higher. There is less than 50% chance of survival if you're a woman in India above 40 and you have breast cancer. Now that's the data that is hard hitting. And some of us just sit with that data and perhaps do nothing. But there is Dr. Geeta Manjunath who's figured this out, that this data needs to now, this inspires me and I need to use the technology to go and find a solution. And that is how she's led the use of non-invasive. Anyone who's gone through a mammograph would know that there is a different compression, it's invasive. And of course, that's a technique that you need to figure out, you use, and that's the only technology before Nirmaya came to the fore, and they use artificial intelligence led non invasive diagnostic, and they use thermal imaging to figure out, detect breast cancer early on. And this team is committed and dedicated to using data, powering AI, and solve and save lives. And that is the detection and the prevention that they're working on. Fascinating story to tell. Again, as much as we spoke about our shopping experience being customized with the use of data, tons of data being collected and collated. If today, like I know I'm sitting on Amazon and most of us are, considering you really can't venture out, there's not much to do. This is pretty much our view to the world. And I wanted to look at new quality of masks that I should buy to protect my family against the COVID when we are going and interacting out. And of course, we all know this is nothing new. I need to tell you, there are tons of other things that get popping up the next time you enter. And you know that there is this purifier, there is this mat, there is this disinfectant, there are the liquids. And more than not, you end up buying those. And that in itself, targeted marketing has generated billions of dollars. And of course, Amazon, Facebook, and Google are doing exceedingly well because they have figured out how to sell, use data, and monetize that to create billions of dollars. And there are other companies that are using that. Tempus is another example where it's all about precision medicine, which is, can we look at your DNA, your RNA, and other data and use genomics, and then be able to figure out, detect early the invasion of cancer in your life, and use that, which is absolute precision medicine, which is customized solution, because you will be treated differently because your body is different. God forbid if any of us have that disease and we need to be treated. So there is this from the old, archaic, unaffordable, slow, disconnected world wherein you go to a doctor, you go give a prescription, and then it gets passed on to someone else and someone else. And somehow we say, there's this somehow a lot of it gets lost in translation. Well, today data is not getting lost in translation, it's getting stored, captured, analyzed, and there is work around it to be able to give users solutions. And this is healthcare, I would say, is just one example where we are able to do that a lot more effectively. And there are tons and tons of other examples, which of course are going to be there as we move along. As much as digital world is interesting, it's kind of it just makes the monologue, and I'm hoping you're tuning in and listening to this and enjoying and perhaps walking away with new nuggets, because if this was an interaction, I know I have a lot to learn from you. Quickly moving gears, we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. We all know India kind of missed the third one, but I'm putting my bets on that we are not going to miss this one. This is all about data. This slide doesn't say much other than it says this is all about data. This is where the lines have blurred, and companies and nations and individuals will thrive if they figure out how to ride the wave of the connected world. If all of us are creating data too, all of us are creating data. When I'm using pedometer in the morning, I'm creating data. When I'm using my office systems, ERPs, I'm creating data. Everywhere we are creating. Right now, the session is getting recorded. We are obviously creating tons of data. All of us are connected and generating and creating data. And therefore, this data is going to be put to use, and something magical is going to be happening to that. And I think that is the thing in front of us, that this is hugely a great opportunity for us to be able to figure out how do we make use of this and recreate newness that is going to be there, which is part of that. And how do we really journey this? So the way I tend to see this is something I said, there are two different worlds we are living in today. There is this physical world that we are living in, wherein we interact with each other. And yet there's this other world that we are living in, which is a completely digital. It's a digital universe that's being created. And I said, let me call it the data galaxy for lack of any different word. And it's also kind of has a dreamy visual feel to it, to say there are these great technologies at the center of it. You cannot do AI if you don't have data. You got to be able to look at that and build all the algorithms for this to work. And this perhaps is the biggest thing that, again, is to change our lives. Now, there is conversation, just a little bit of digression. Is AI going to replace us? Of course not. It's going to replace perhaps the routine, mundane jobs that can be. But when you're capturing a lot of data, you're gathering insights, at the end of the day, there has to be subject matter experts. It's like you will need behavior psychologists to be able to understand what consumer behavior is. You will need people to make sense of this data, to dip it in the gravy of contextualization and perhaps put a great dish on the table. So my sense is, if you read Digital Nation, it also talks about India today. You're gathering it, but that's data too. More data than perhaps we need. So it is going to be interesting to say how humans and technologies are going to come together and therefore look at problem solving and an opportunity that we all need to look at. Let me take one example of what this is doing. Cultural globalization, where we are all powered on all the time. This is our life. We're all on. Personal customization, we spoke about. Activity automation, yes, and we'll talk about that. New discoveries, of course, there are completely new things that are getting created which weren't there perhaps before. And I will talk about one such discovery in a moment from now. My favorite slide, and I would really want to talk about this. This is early on an unseeable phenomenon, I would say. We at Western Digital have played a historical role in being able to capture the image of a black hole. And this was done, of course, there is this entire project that was put together for years. And we are very happy to be a part of this. And I would love to show you here. Well, this is the pin I carry. It's very small. I hope you can see this. But this is the image of the black hole given by the person who was leading the project. And now this is something which is a very interesting story of if you take a low resolution picture with your phone, you perhaps are going to take a 3.5 megabytes of data on that. And yet, when you look at this first image of a supermassive black hole in the galaxy M7, yeah, M87, it had 4.5 petabytes of data. A simple image, 3.5 MB to 4.5 petabytes of data. And just to bring a frame of reference to what kind of volume of data are we talking about, this is simply to say that 1 petabyte is equal to 4,000 typical cell phone photos, 4,000 typical cell phone photos taken per day for close to 200 years. And you would get 1 petabyte. You multiply that by 4.5, you're of course looking at a completely different data. And this was done because we had the helium seal drives, ultra star helio seal, which was used, and there were 960 hard disk drives that went on to capture one image of this black hole. Well, that is when we say that you enable new discoveries, you enable new phenomenons, and that is what data can do to you. It can give you a pin which will become a historical moment in your life, and you say you worked for a firm which you did that. And of course, look at the entire pride of people who worked on that project, and of course they kind of collaborated together. Two quick other examples, but like I said, this was my favorite one. There is this lights out. We're looking at the entire connected world, wherein how can you map your shop floors better? Can you do a lights out planning? We have a complete lights out factory, at Western Digital, which is clearly something that we love to showcase, and the fact that it's given us a lot of returns. And the most important thing is, as much as it's lights out, it's all robotics, it's all technology. The people in the factory were redeployed, they were upskilled, because like I said, the bottom of the jobs are perhaps going to be automated, but there is this middle order, new order, higher order jobs that are going to get created, and it's the responsibility of all of us to be able to use data to skill them and kind of put them on a different track, and therefore they continue to earn a living. Genome sequencing I talked about, but there's also something that we are looking at: different computing structures, storage level architectures, completely different, so that we can enable our partner companies to be able to come forward and do some magic with data, because this is what the world is opening up to. Coming back home to my favorite country, and all of us, a lot of us who belong here, India has had a great digital story. And I would say today the world has a great digital story, because thanks to a mild thanks to pandemic, not to take away the pain and the entire painful experience that it has unleashed on the world, not to marginalize that, but it has kind of made everyone go digital overnight. The schools have become digital. We in India have the largest footprint of digital identity, which is 125 crore Aadhaar registrations. We have more than 1 billion UPI transactions. Paytm has never been perhaps happier before. With this kind of digital influx in our life, we clearly are looking at India's journey being very, very prominent. And that is why when I started the conversation, I said that I'm extremely confident that India will be able to ride the wave. But this is something which I would say is a conversation that, as much as we see this, that we've done extremely well, we have done extremely well. There are these villages that are still not connected, and that is something we need to be mindful of. But I would say let's take a moment and say this has been a glorious contribution. And as much as we have plans to be a 5 trillion in a few years, and 1 trillion of that is a digital IT footprint that we want to leave, initiatives like that are going to go a long way. Conferences like that, conversations like that, great startup community, all of us are going to be there to add to this great riding wave of India shining as a digital nation and also becoming perhaps part of a very critical supply chain for the world at large. This is going to be a fascinating world that you and I will learn to live in and hopefully, enjoy. So what is it that I want to share? I would say there's one thing that I want to talk about to say it's a great story how data is helping us power new technologies, how new technologies are helping us bring in solutions, save lives. There is an agri precision agri, there is this entire mobility, urban mobility, there are automated cars, there are experiences which are different. Our health, our lives are in control today a lot more than perhaps before. Our decisions are much faster. The companies are investing and making use of this. There are faster, there are better business models. And as much as we are there and we are connected, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that I would say that half of the world is still not connected. And if we talk about India, less than 400 million still don't have internet access. And that I would say, it's like someone said, I went to this place, it was very cold, no one wears boots. Really? Well, that's an opportunity for you to go and sell. And I would say this is our opportunity to include a lot more people and let not be digital divide, but a digital opportunity be there in front of us. So if all of you need to see, you need to think, am I bringing in another person in the digital fold? I would say for me, the most favorite conversations are when I'm buying a new iPhone for my mom or perhaps my dad. I would love to get on a call. Unfortunately, it's something you can't travel these days is freely. I would love to get on a call, do a video, and take my parents through that. How does this work? How to download new apps? How to offer, use Swiggy? How to do this Paytm online, transactions online, Google Pay? For me, that's a favorite part of my conversation because it's one thing to say that we are advancing, it's other to say that we are taking everyone along. So I think each one of us have a role to play here. If you look at in the spatial divide, we have a lot of cities that are urban planning. We're talking about smart cities, and India is really foraying into that direction. And then, of course, there are those that don't even have electricity still. So I think we do have still divides to conquer, and that is a huge opportunity in front of us. This is kind of close to my heart. I still don't understand this, but that's data, right in front of me. It's a fact that only 1 in 2 men have a smartphone, but less than 1 in 3 women have it. Well, that's an opportunity to include a lot more women. And of course, in the workforce and in the digital inclusion, I think that is something I would love for a startup to go and think to say how digital literacy can be there. Because again, India needs as much as we say that India needs to be having a 5 trillion economy, and one of that will come from with today, which is good, 20%. Today it's only 10%. So we have a humongous task in front of us as India to go and conquer this. And as much as we think we can do it, my very, very emphatic view is we can perhaps ride this way and do it successfully if all of us journey it together, which was how we say that Noble Yuval Harari said that we conquered and we dominate the planet because we collaborated. And that's a spirit that us as human beings have. I don't think we can do it alone. I think we can only do it once we are together. So that is my call. At the start of the session, I did talk about that. How is it that as much as it's a fire, it can keep us warm, put food on the table, and of course, help our evolution. And it did. Data is doing all of that for us today. It is powering business models, it is giving returns. Yet, there is this California fire, which has completely wreaked havoc. I have a lot of friends, and I'm sure a lot of you do, who had to move homes, who perhaps lost a lot. So we need to be very, very mindful. And there are some questions that need to be answered around data so that we can only put this in context and look at the usefulness of it and make some very judicious, right decisions and not let this engulf us and dominate us. This is something we need to be always ahead of in terms of our ability to capture, capitalize, content, create, share, store, distill insights, and then perhaps put it to the right use. We cannot let it get ahead of us and not know what's happening. And sometimes that's what technology does. It just gets ahead of what you can perhaps get your arms around. So therefore, we need to be very, very clear in having a few questions answered. I'm going to leave this as thoughts for you. Please don't even for a moment think I have the answers. I don't. I'm part of that curious lot who has a lot of questions and would love to journey with you and get the answers probably figured out. And that's another thing that is there about people who are in technology businesses, in startups. Let's keep the curiosity on, because one thing that data does give us is information, insights. But if you're not curious about it, it's like Socrates said, an examined life is worth living, an unexamined one, of course not. I would say if you are examining your life and you know what to do, but you're not working on it, well, that's a very different problem then. So we know that we have data, it's telling us something. It's time to put that to action and make that work for us. And that's what I think is a call for the companies too. I would love to see 100% companies have a data strategy and put this at the core. So the questions are, what is the value? Today, data is a currency. In 1900s, we knew that oil was the one that was the currency. And of course, companies that monetize that were rich. And today we know Facebook, Google, and Amazons of the world are rich in billions of dollars and powering our lives, use of data, selling, using, and enriching business models. Who is going to be deriving this? What is the value of this data and who benefits from it is a question we need to ask. A lot of questions around owning of the data. Who owns it? EU came up with GDPR to say, well, we need to protect it. India is drafting its views on that. Well, we need to also be mindful to say who owns data. We know there are marketplaces online wherein you can go sell anonymously your data and probably make money and bucks out of it. We also know there's a huge caution in terms of how your privacy sometimes get intruded, and you need to be mindful of what is the use of data. And I think who be mindful of what is the use of data. So the way this is going is the way that, when you read a lot of research around this, is pretty much says the next 4 to 5 years, individuals will own the data, organizations will tend to manage. But it's a hypothesis which is dipped in data, and only time will tell which direction it's going. I'll be curious to know the results, and I'm sure I'd love to play an active role. And of course, there's this entire thing about security, privacy, and integrity of data. And like I said, this is something which is an opportunity. And if done well, we will learn to reap the benefits out of it. This is my concluding remark to say, as much as data seems like it's a very complicated, it's far off thing, because there are these big data lakes and analytics and science and all of that behind it. There are these complex technologies that are there every day and revealing, and there's lots to do with it. I would say this is about you and me. It's about the journey you and I want to walk together. So the digital journey that you and I want to walk together. As the country, I have a responsibility towards it. As an individual, I have a responsibility. And therefore, I think the end of it is going to be what you and I choose to make of it. If we say this is not my problem or my opportunity, we'll either miss the gain or perhaps be part of the loss. And that wouldn't be a happy situation. So I would say it's what we choose to make of it. I don't think all the answers are there, but as long as we stay curious, as long as we stay close to the problem and the opportunity, the answers are likely to evolve. The role of data is likely to evolve, and there are new, disruptions that are waiting to happen. But I think this story is here to say this data as a fire is here to stay. Keep us warm, keep us protected, and of course, constantly guide us. Have the regulators guide us, the governments guide us, the forums like this guide us to say, well, let's use it ethically. Let's stay on the right side of it and not cross. Let's not intrude, but let's use the data that people are willingly giving us. Let's sign on the dotted line as to what we are doing with it. So I would say in conclusion, like we have successfully succeeded millions of years ago to harness the fire for the benefit of humanity, my vote is that we will continue to economize and use the right side of the data for value and benefit to humankind, the mankind, womankind, and of course all of us will have a much better, more intelligent, powerful, at our fingertips disposal, a lot of technology and data that we will continue to utilize and make this world a lot more healthier, safer, better. And of course, the future depends on data. Thank you.
Thank you, Supria. That was a lot of data, right? So, but fascinating to hear your insights, your vision, the business models that you spoke about. So we are on fire after hearing, your speech. But I won't let you go without asking one question, okay? Right? You've been doing a lot of, work on innovation within Western Digital, right? So why don't you tell us a bit more? And I was party to that, so I want the whole global audience to know what you're doing.
Thanks, Venki. Western Digital, again, worldwide, when you look at the data, it's the as much as we're talking about the balance sheet, the P&Ls, for us, we are in our patent portfolio is one of the richest, and we are in the top 5 across the world. We take a lot of pride in that. In a business, when we are talking about technology, data also is your competitive edge. When you utilize that to make products, you also know that you're in a game and you want to be ahead. So there are patents and trade secrets that you file. But all of this, I would say, is something that is rooted in the spirit of innovation. So if I look at the values that this company has, and again, like any leader would sit and say, these are not what we paste on the table. This is what we work very hard at realizing, taking everyone along and kind of journeying on what the value means. But think big, do it together and make it happen. But think big is a value, which is my favorite. It's all about think big, think ahead. What is the new disruption that's going to happen? So I think that is what we are doing. And if you today see the world that you and I live in, everything is to the end and the edge. You look at autonomous trucks. There are not going to be, there is going to be a hybrid model of where data is going to reside. It's going to be at the endpoint. It's going to be at the some space, where we can extract, but not at the speed at which we want. And there is speed that needs to be there. So I think this you know walking this entire continuum for one end to the end, the entire thing is rooted in what we call innovation. So when the new hires join in Venki, we take them through a 3 weeks program. We do have a very strong fellow track in the company wherein we actually encourage people to come forward and say, you don't have to be a manager. And I'm very happy to say that in India, I see a lot more technical tracks now than perhaps I saw 5 years back. So I think there is that, presence of fellows. There is this always focus on saying, what paper have you written? What patent have you filed? So we celebrate patent day online. We have buddies on patents who probably, we had somebody who was with us who filed 15 patents in less than 2 years. And we were like, wow, do you really have a full-time job? Because he was also extremely good at what else he did. So we had him come and mentor and buddy. So I think this is about not one, this is multiple things we do wherein we say that innovation is the core and we encourage engineers to come forward. And I say it very fondly in India to say, you'll join as an engineer, but I promise you we'll create an inventor out of you. So
Fantastic,
that's what we do.
fantastic. This is outstanding. I hope that there are many women leaders like you who's kind of thinking big and thinking for the people, thinking how they need to grow. And thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. And I know you kind of came on board at very short notice, but thank you very much. You've always been a big supporter of TIE, and we really, on behalf of TIE, the board of TIE at Bangalore, we'd love to kind of meet up with you again and hear what you're doing at Western Digital. Thank you very much, Supria.